Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. If you ask me, I've been doing just fine. So, before we get into today's business, I would like to appreciate everyone who has been commenting, liking, subscribing, and also appreciate everyone who's about to subscribe. That really means a lot to me. And continue sharing that love with friends and family by telling them about Portia Tiara. So, back into today's business, celibacy. Yeah, a lot of you might be wondering why this topic, Portia, why this topic. So I chose this topic because I did my own research by asking people what they understand about this topic. Then I realized no, people don't actually get this state. People think maybe people are depriving themselves or something like that. So I just said no, I should address this issue. So I got a friend of mine who really understand this topic or this state. Guys really understand it, and he goes by the name Tapiwa Mesa, and he's gonna help us by telling us what celibacy is and what celibacy is not. And if we have more questions about celibacy, I'll just drop his social text down below so that you go into his DMs for more questions, or if you just want to shoot your shot, girls. I'm joking. Yeah, I'll do that. So that's it. I hope you enjoy.
A good day to you. Today we are going to look at celibacy. We are going to define what it is and what it is not. We are also going to look at the reasons why people choose to go celibate. And we are going to look at what goes into consideration in making the decision and the benefits and the downside of being celibate. So, celibacy is a state of voluntarily being unmarried or sexually abstinent, or it can mean both. So, first of all, we need to have to have clarity on the difference between abstinence and celibacy. So, abstinence is basically a decision not to have penetrative sex or sexual relations for a certain period of time, which we can say that maybe, for example, until someone gets married. And then when it comes to celibacy, it is a vow to remain abstinent over an extended period of time. And this may mean a lifetime to other people. But now the difference between the two terms is that abstinence is for a short period of time, and celibacy, it goes on for an extended period of time. So the reasons why people choose to go celibacy, there are a lot of reasons out there why people choose to do that. So, but today we'll talk about maybe two reasons or three. The first one being the religious reasons why people choose to go in this state. As we understand, we have different religions out there, and people, they cite their own reasons why they choose religiously to go into that state. But I will talk about the Christianity fraternity. So, of the people that I've heard that have encountered this state, or that have gone into this state, the main reason is to draw closer to God. They want to discover themselves spiritually. They want to discover their inner person. And I will just take a quote from the Bible, from the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7. I'll go to verse 5. I'll skip verse 1 up to 4, and I'll just jump to verse 5. We have Paul addressing the issues of the people at Corinthians. He says that on chapter 5, I'll read, "Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent and for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer, then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." So here we have Paul speaking to married people. He is saying that do not deprive each other except by mutual consent. end for a time. So remember that when we defined celibacy, we talked about it being a voluntary action that we take uh, over a certain period of time, not to engage in sexual relations. So here we have Paul also advising that you need to have a mutual consent and agreement between the two, between the husband and the wife. This is for married people. That's our first perspective. And also he says that so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. This is the reason that I've just said, that people want to grow in their spiritual lives. They want to draw closer to God. And Paul is also saying the same here, that you want to devote yourselves to prayer. So this is one of the reasons why people choose to go celibate. They want to draw closer to God, and they want to devote themselves into prayer. And he goes on verse 6 to say that I say this as a concession, not as a command. I say this as a concession, not as a command. He's saying this as an agreement. He's saying this as a recommendation, not as a command. But on perspective number 2, we have a command. Perspective number 2 is for the unmarried people, where we have a command from the Bible that says, "Do sex before marriage is a sin upon God. Is a sin before God." So that is perspective number 2. Perspective number 2, we are commanded not to have sex before marriage. So observing this command, I will say that it's you volunteer to observe the command. Rather, for all Christians, you don't need to volunteer to observe this command. It's a command that is coming to every Christian. A command you do not observe, you do not volunteer to a command, but you observe a command. You abide by a command. So for us not to indulge in sex as Christians before marriage, it is not voluntary. It is a command. I hope we are together here. And also, the second reason why people choose to do this is for cultural reasons. We have so many diverse cultures in the world. And some cultures, they say that you do not indulge in sexual relations until you get married, or until you pay dowry or lobola in Africa. So this is one of the reasons, right? This is one of the reasons. So these reasons, I would say that they are semi-celibacy, because we do not have people voluntarily doing observing these commands, but we have people abiding by the command, right? We have people observing the command. So it's like a law. You don't really choose, but you are supposed to. You're supposed to abide by the law. And the other reason, I would take it as a personal reason. This even goes to people that are married and people that are not married. So personal reasons, they are personal. It may be you saying that I want to focus on my studies, I want to focus on my school, and I want to focus on my friendship, or I want to focus on my purpose, finding the person that I am. So these are some of the reasons why people go into celibacy state. But there are many reasons out there why people choose to do that. And now I'll talk about what goes into consideration when we want to go celibate. So I would just speak of 3 things that I think are important towards the subject. So the first thing that you need to do is to do your research. You need to have an understanding of what it is to be celibate. What does it entail, and what does it not entail? So someone asked a question about the subject, saying that does celibacy includes kissing? So there are 2 things that we have to understand. There is the physical fraternity of emotions, and there is the spiritual fraternity of emotions. So kissing is physical, right? You you get in contact with the next person, or you get in contact with your person. That is physical. So this is why I'm saying you need to do your research. You need to have an understanding of what type of celibacy are you going to do. What type of celibacy are you going to make a commitment to? You may choose not to have this physical contact, right? You may choose not to kiss, you may choose not to hug, you may choose not to have sexual relations. It is you who define what celibacy is. But the important thing is it has to be voluntary and it has to be sexually abstinent. You need not to indulge in sex. So you may kiss, you may hug, you may flirt, you may do all these other things, but the solid base of celibacy is voluntary and sexual abstinence. Those are the pillars of celibacy. No matter how you then define it, or no matter how you choose to customize it, but those two solids, so those two pillars, they have to be there for it to be celibacy. The second thing that I'm going to speak of is we need to make a commitment when we want to go into celibacy. There has to be a commitment. And so when I read the part that Paul speaks about them, he speaks about the mutual consent, and he speaks about the time frame of how long are you going to have that mutual consent. How long are you going into into the state? So that is a commitment. You have to agree with your person, or with your husband or your wife, or with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, that we are not going to do these things for a certain period of time, and it has to be agreed upon. If the next person does not agree, it is not celibacy. There has to be an agreement first. That is making a commitment. Point number 3, it speaks to define the boundaries. I think I've said this when I was talking about the reasons why people go into this state. You have to define your boundaries. By boundaries, I mean that when you are married, or when you are in a relationship, when you have made a decision to go celibacy, you have to define the things that you are going to do, the things that you are not going to do. Like I've spoken of the physical nature of celibacy, and the emotional nature of it. You have to define, to say, are we going to kiss? Are we going to hug? And on the emotional side, are we going to flirt? Are we going to feel a certain way about each other during this time of celibacy? But the pillar of all these 3 points that I've just talked about is to do your research. You need to do your research, you need to make a commitment, and you need to define your boundaries. And there are 2 pillars. There are 2 pillars that we need to look at whenever we say we are going to make a commitment towards celibacy. The first pillar is voluntary. There has to be a mutual consent. The second pillar is sexual abstinence. You need not to engage into penetrative sex. And I will also speak of the benefits. Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope I have answered some of the questions that you had, and some of those unanswered questions, keep them coming. We'll explore more on those questions as we talk more about the subject, and I hope you have picked 1 or 2 things about celibacy. Thank you.